My name is Dr. Sloane Hart, 34 years old. Christmas Eve had always been a rumor in my profession. As a cardiologist, my holidays blurred into a cycle of 12-hour shifts, fluorescent lights, and the steady beep of monitors. But that year, a miracle disguised itself as a small favor. A colleague remembered I had covered his Thanksgiving, and with a half smile he told me, "Go home, Sloane. Your daughter deserves to see you at Christmas." The idea of surprising Ruby filled me with a strange giddiness, like I was the one receiving the gift. I didn't text. I didn't call. I drove straight to my parents' house, rehearsing in my head the way Ruby's eyes would light up when I walked in, how she'd run into my arms. I imagined warmth, laughter, the kind of family holiday people put on postcards. But the door wasn't locked. And when I pushed it open, what greeted me looked like the aftermath of a war no one admitted had happened. The Christmas tree leaned like a drunk who had survived a bar fight, ornaments smashed across the rug, gravy smeared into the tablecloth, broken dishes piled in a corner. Yet in the middle of this wreckage, my family sat calmly eating dessert, laughing at some joke my brother Logan was telling, jingle bells drifting softly from the stereo as if to cover the scent of chaos. For a moment, I thought I had stepped into the wrong house. Then my mother, Valerie, glanced up and froze. My sister Bianca's fork clattered against her plate. Logan's wife gave a startled laugh that died halfway out of her mouth. "No Ruby." I scanned the table once, twice. My chest tightened. "Where's Ruby?" No one answered. My mother's shoulders stiffened, and she muttered, "That mess. Your Ruby did that. Take a look." She gestured vaguely toward the hall. Bianca flicked her manicured hand like shooing a fly. "Over there." The hall felt endless, and then I saw her. Ruby stood in the corner of the next room, her fancy red dress ripped, streaked with dirt. Scratches lined her legs, her shoes missing. She was crying quietly, the kind of crying you do when you've already given up hope anyone will listen. When her eyes found me, she broke. "Mom!" She launched herself at me, arms wrapping around my knees with desperate force. I bent, scooped her up, and that's when I saw it. Black marker across her forehead. Liar. A cardboard sign hanging from her neck. Family disgrace. For a second, I wondered if the night shifts had finally broken me, if I was hallucinating. But Ruby's small body trembled in my arms. This was real. My family had done this. I carried her back into the dining room. She clung to me as though I might vanish again. The table froze mid-bite. Dad sipped his juice as if nothing was wrong. Logan chuckled at his own joke, then faltered when he saw me. Bianca raised her chin, smug. "You've got to be kidding me," I said, my voice shaking. "She was in the next room with a sign around her neck while you sat here stuffing your faces?" No one moved. My mother calmly sipped her coffee. "What the hell is wrong with you?" I snapped. Bianca finally leaned back in her chair, eyes gleaming. "She ruined Christmas, Sloane. Knocked over the tree, broke dishes, threw food. Then she lied about it, tried to blame Nolan." At the mention of her son, Nolan sat up straighter, his 9-year-old face schooled into wide-eyed innocence. Ruby buried her face in my shoulder, sobbing. "Mom, he pushed me. It's true." I stroked her hair, then fixed Bianca with a stare sharp enough to cut glass. "You heard her. She says Nolan pushed her." Bianca tossed her hair. "That's not true. He saw her climb on the chair and reach for the ornament. She fell, knocked everything down. Nolan always tells the truth." I pulled out my phone, raised it deliberately, and took photos of Ruby, the sign, the marker, the scratches. Each click echoed in the tense silence. Dad squinted at me. "What do you think you're doing?" "Because tomorrow, you'll all pretend this never happened." I tore the sign from Ruby's neck and threw it on the floor. Tried to wipe the marker from her forehead, but her skin was raw, red. She flinched at my touch. I held her closer, fury knotting in my chest. "Look at her," I said. "She's trembling. Even if she had knocked over your tree, which she didn't, this is not discipline. This is cruelty." Mom dabbed her mouth with a napkin like she was presiding over a trial. She lied. She had to be shown the truth. "Truth?" My voice dropped into a dangerous calm. "Discipline is helping a child clean up a mess, not branding her forehead and starving her while you eat pie." Dad finally muttered, "She needs to take responsibility." I laughed, bitter and sharp. Who left a chair near the tree? Who set it up so badly it tipped over? Who watched her fall and didn't help her when she scraped her legs? Where's your responsibility? Mom shot to her feet, her eyes cold. "She ruined our Christmas. You're too soft, always coddling her. She has to learn." Logan added with smug authority. She'll remember this lesson. Oh, she'll remember, I spat, and so will I. I scanned their faces. Bianca, perfect hair unmoving. Logan, convinced the world bent to him. My parents, iceberg and spectator. Not one flinch of guilt. Not one crack of doubt. Then Ruby tugged my sleeve and whispered, Mommy, I'm so hungry. The words punched me harder than any insult. They hadn't fed her. They had left her to stand for hours, humiliated and starving. Something in me snapped. I didn't need their explanations anymore. I didn't need them. Sweetheart, we're going home, I said gently. Mom gestured toward the kitchen with false generosity. She can eat now. There's plenty left. I ignored her, helped Ruby into her coat, buttoned it carefully. Before leaving, I turned back and said, She isn't guilty, but even if she were, you had no right. You will remember this night. Snow crunched under our feet as we stepped outside. Ruby's small body pressed against me, whispering again, Mom, I'm hungry. At home, I fed her warm turkey and pie, bathed her, and tucked her into bed. When her breathing steadied, I slid my phone under the frame, voice recorder on. Baby, I whispered, tell me what happened. Her voice cracked with hiccups. Nolan said the ornament was crooked, said I was small, I could fix it. He held the chair. When I climbed up, he pushed me. The tree fell. Then he screamed it was me. Aunt Bianca said I was lying. She hung the sign. Grandma wrote on my face. Grandpa and Uncle Logan held me when I tried to run. Her small hands shook. I was so scared, Mommy. I thought you weren't coming. I pulled her close, kissed her damp cheek. Sweetheart, none of this is your fault. What they did is their shame, not yours. You're brave, and I'll never let anyone hurt you again. She drifted into sleep at last. I watched her chest rise and fall, my heart a mix of relief and fire. They had branded her once, but I would brand this night into their memories forever. 2 days from now, their phones would ring, and they would learn what it meant when I stopped being their ATM and became their reckoning. Morning lights spilled across the kitchen table, illuminating the faint shadow of letters still etched into Ruby's forehead. I had scrubbed gently, rubbed cream across her skin, but Liar lingered like a ghost that wouldn't leave. She sipped hot chocolate, chewing carefully on a pancake, as though she feared someone might take the food away. I wanted to tell her it was gone, that hunger and humiliation had been left behind with the snow at my parents' door. But lies weren't how I parented. I studied her small face and felt an old ache rise, the ache of knowing exactly how it felt to be labeled, dismissed, minimized. That ache had followed me my whole life, because I was a middle child. Not the golden eldest, Bianca, who had been Mom's confidant and Dad's pride, not the adored youngest, Logan, who could do no wrong. I was the placeholder, the shill-managed child. The memories flickered like film reels. Bianca's birthday parties with balloons and cakes taller than she was. Logan's sports trophies lined up like a shrine. And me? A store-bought cake, candles leaning, eaten at the kitchen table with a shrug. Bianca was special. Logan was the boy, and I was practical. Chores landed on my shoulders because Bianca was studying and Logan was excused. Help your mother, they told me, as if housework was my destiny. I scrubbed bathrooms, shoveled snow, cooked dinner. They bought Bianca perfume and Logan a new bike. I got a winter coat, 2 sizes too big, so it would last. Even as a child, I understood the equation. They didn't starve me, didn't beat me, but love was rationed differently. Bianca was cherished. Logan was the heir, and me? Useful. I clawed my way out. Homework at the kitchen counter, medical textbooks smudged with grease because I studied while stirring soup, nights spent in libraries, scholarships pieced together like duct tape. Then med school, residency, fellowship, endless nights under fluorescent light, the smell of antiseptics soaked into my hair. I became a cardiologist. My job consumed me, yes, but it was my salvation too. Except to my family, I wasn't Dr. Sloane Hart. I was a walking ATM with a stethoscope. Mom, the pension's tiny, the meds are expensive. Bianca, Nolan needs camp. Ross didn't get his bonus. Logan, Piper's activities cost money. Can you cover this month? Always hands out. Always looking at me as if my existence was a bottomless slot machine. And if I said no, I wasn't family. I was the traitor. Even my marriage was another disappointment to them. I'd thought marrying a lawyer would grant me respect in their eyes. Instead, when he left for a younger colleague, My mother's only comment was, "With your personality, no wonder." Bianca smirked. "Told you lawyers can't be trusted." Logan just shrugged. When Ruby was born, the cycle repeated. Piper, Logan's daughter, was the darling, praised for every pirouette. Nolan, Bianca's boy, was the leader, adored by grandparents. Ruby? Honest, straightforward, quiet, and dismissed as ordinary. Everything she did was brushed off. Drew a picture? Anyone could do that. Memorized a poem? Piper dances in a troupe already. I told myself words didn't matter. Ruby would find her own people, but words became actions. Nolan especially knew how to twist them. He'd shove when adults weren't looking, then smile wide, wide eyes of innocence. I'd seen him pinch, kick, whisper cruel things, but when called out, he was polite, charming, a future politician in training. Adults lapped it up. Such a good boy. And Ruby, my sweet girl, blushed and stammered when accused, which only made her look guilty. They believed him, always. And now it had culminated in permanent marker and cardboard on Christmas Eve. I looked at Ruby chewing her pancake, the word liar still faint on her skin, and something hardened in me. Enough. I pulled her coat on, buckled her into the car, and drove straight to the hospital. My hospital. My colleagues knew me, trusted me, respected me. They documented every scratch on her legs, every bruise on her arms, the red raw patches where the marker had been scrubbed, photographs, notes, official medical records. Not just my word, not just Ruby's. Evidence. Back home, I opened the drawer where the Christmas gifts waited. 2 envelopes with Disneyland tickets, one for Bianca's family, one for Logan's. Another envelope with a spa weekend for my parents. Everyone had been counting down. Nolan had drawn pictures of the castle. Piper had memorized fireworks schedules. My parents had pretended to grumble, but I'd overheard them quietly asking about bus times. I sat at the kitchen table, picked up each glossy ticket, and tore it into strips. The sound was crisp, deliberate, cathartic. Strip after strip, until the floor was littered with confetti. I slid the pieces back into the envelopes, sealed them shut. Gifts returned to sender, shredded. It was the best gift I had ever given myself. Then I opened my laptop. My fingers hovered over the keyboard for a moment, trembling with adrenaline. Then I began closing valves one by one. Automatic transfer to my parents. Shut off. No more extra pension. No more emergency medical coverage. No more roof repairs. Bianca's camp balance for Nolan. Canceled. I called the office, told them the payment wouldn't be coming. If his parents paid, he could go. If not, the spot would be given to another child. Perfect. Logan's car repair, which I had agreed to cover last week, voided. I called the shop, canceled my payment. The bill would go to him directly. I clicked through each account like a surgeon tying off arteries. Clean, precise, irreversible. The house was silent, except for Ruby's soft humming in the other room, her voice fragile but real. I leaned back, staring at the glowing screen, and thought, this was just the beginning. Because photographs weren't enough, medical notes weren't enough. What I had now was evidence, but what I wanted was accountability. I pictured Bianca's smug tilt of the chin, Logan's careless smirk, my mother's cold eyes, my father's silence. They thought I would grumble, forgive, and keep paying, the way I always had. They thought money bound me to them tighter than blood. But money had been the chain, and tonight I'd cut it. Still, I wasn't done. The real reckoning required more than shutting off the faucet. It required something they couldn't shrug off, something permanent. Ruby's voice drifted from the living room, singing softly to herself, a Christmas carol half forgotten and off-key. It should have broken me. Instead, it steadied me. Because her song was proof she was still whole, still capable of joy, even after what they did. And that was the only reminder I needed. Anything that pushed my daughter down, I would make sure collapsed beneath its own weight. I gathered the shredded envelopes, stacked them neatly, and placed them back where the family expected their holiday surprises to come from. In a few days, they would open them with greedy anticipation and discover the truth. Not a word, not a lecture, just paper falling like snow. The phone started buzzing before noon the next day. I had expected it, almost timed it, the way you wait for the first aftershock once an earthquake settles. Bianca's number flashed across the screen, and I let it ring twice before answering. Her voice was pitched so high it could have cracked glass. "What the hell is this, Sloane? What did you send us? You think this is funny?" I sipped my coffee, steady. "Those were your tickets. Now they're confetti." "You've lost your mind." Nolan's been counting down the days. He drew pictures of the castle. He talks about it every night before bed. "You promised." "Maybe he should start dreaming about honesty," I said flatly. "Cheaper dream." And I hung up. The silence that followed was almost musical. It didn't last. Logan's name appeared next, and I answered without hesitation. His voice came like fire through the receiver. "Are you serious? Piper's crying. My wife's a wreck. You ripped up her tickets?" "Yes," I said simply. "You heartless—" I cut him off. "Now you know what it feels like when a child cries." The line went dead. I set my phone on the table, opened my laptop, and pulled up the folder I had created. It was labeled in bold black font, Heart File. Inside, I placed everything. The photographs of Ruby's forehead, the marker bleeding across her skin, the cardboard sign, her scratched legs, the medical reports signed by my colleagues, dated and notarized, and the audio file, Ruby's small voice, halting, trembling, naming each adult who had restrained her, who had written on her, who had humiliated her. Each piece was like a puzzle edge locking into place. The picture forming wasn't complicated. It was ugly, clear, undeniable. My phone buzzed again. This time it was my parents' speakerphone. Valerie's voice was ice. "Where's the money, Sloane? It was due today." "It's not coming." "What do you mean it's not coming?" Dad's voice broke in, sharp but brittle. "You owe us. We raised you." "No," I said, my tone calm, surgical. "You raised an ATM. The ATM's closed." "You ungrateful—" I hung up. The house was silent again, save for Ruby humming softly in the living room, coloring at the coffee table. Her head tilted, her brow still faintly marked. I watched her for a long time, my chest filling with both grief and something harder, sharper, resolve. I returned to the folder, clicking through each photo, labeling them meticulously. Exhibit A, marker. Exhibit B, sign. Exhibit C, medical record. Exhibit D, recorded statement. I formatted, time-stamped, arranged. Not because I doubted my daughter. Not because I doubted myself, but because I had learned long ago, when you are the middle child, when your word is dismissed, evidence is the only language anyone respects. The phone rang again. Bianca, this time shrieking so loudly, I had to pull the phone back from my ear. "They told me at the camp office you canceled the payment. Nolan loses his spot if I don't pay now. Do you realize what you've done?" "Yes," I said evenly. "I've reminded you that parenting is your job." "I don't have that kind of money," she screamed. "Then find a free playground. They have swings." I ended the call. Ruby looked up at me then, big eyes questioning. "Mom, are they mad?" I crouched beside her, brushed a strand of hair from her forehead. "Yes, sweetheart. They're mad because I stopped paying for their mistakes." "Will they be mad forever?" I considered my words carefully. "Maybe, but that's not our problem anymore." She nodded, thoughtful, then returned to her drawing. When she was busy, I added the final piece to the folder, a plain manila file embossed with 3 letters. I traced them with my finger, CPS. That was the part they weren't expecting. They thought my punishment was financial, that I would hurl words and cut checks in the same breath. But words faded. Money could be begged for, stolen, manipulated. What they had done to Ruby required something heavier, something permanent. My phone rang again, vibrating angrily across the table. Logan this time. "You can't do this to us," he barked. "You don't understand, Sloane. Piper's been waiting for this trip. My wife's pregnant. We needed this break." I let him rant, let him pile excuse upon excuse until he finally sputtered into silence. Then I said, "You should have thought of that when you held my daughter's arms while they wrote on her forehead." He cursed and hung up. For the first time, I allowed myself to smile. Not cruelly, not with satisfaction, but with a strange, quiet release. Years of carrying them, financially, emotionally, even morally, and now the burden was finally lifting. That night, after Ruby went to bed, I sat in the dim light of the kitchen with the heart file open in front of me. I didn't feel guilt, I felt clarity. Because in every photo, in every note, in every tremble of Ruby's recorded voice, one truth rang louder than any family defense. They had crossed a line that could not be uncrossed. I closed the folder, stacked it neatly, and slid it into my briefcase. Tomorrow, it would leave my hands and land in someone else's. Someone who didn't love them, who didn't excuse them, who wouldn't confuse cruelty with discipline. As I turned off the light, my phone buzzed one last time. Voicemails, missed calls, text messages stacked like a chorus of outrage. But I didn't listen. Instead, I walked into Ruby's room, watched her sleep with one hand clutching her stuffed rabbit, her breathing soft and even. I whispered to the dark, "Anything that pushes you down, I'll make sure falls harder." The words tasted like a vow. And in my bones, I knew, by this time tomorrow, their doors would echo with a different kind of knock. The waiting room smelled faintly of stale coffee and printer ink. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, flickering just enough to make the air feel heavier. Across from me sat a woman with tired eyes and a toddler tugging at her sleeve. She kept her gaze on the floor. I wondered, briefly, if her story sounded anything like mine, or if she too had walked into a family gathering and found her child branded like livestock. When the receptionist finally called my name, I gathered the briefcase in my lap and walked into a small, windowless office. A woman in her 40s sat behind the desk, her blazer crisp, her hair pulled into a no-nonsense bun. Her eyes weren't cruel, but they weren't soft either. They carried the kind of weight that comes from hearing too many stories like mine. "Dr. Hart," she said, extending her hand. "I'm Ms. Lawson. You said you wanted to file a report regarding your daughter?" I placed the briefcase on the desk, clicked it open, and slid the folder across to her. "Not just a report," I said. "Evidence." She opened it, flipping through the photographs first. Her expression didn't change, but her fingers tightened on the glossy paper of Ruby's face with the word "liar" still staining her skin. Then the cardboard sign. Then the medical notes documenting the scratches, the bruises, the marker burn. Finally, she clicked play on the audio file, listening to Ruby's small voice break as she recounted every detail. The silence that followed was clinical, heavy, absolute. When Ms. Lawson spoke, her tone carried no doubt. "This is child abuse." 2 words. I had known them already, but hearing them from her, hearing them spoken aloud in a room where excuses didn't breathe, was like steel locking into place. She tapped her pen against the desk. "We'll be opening a file immediately. Since your daughter isn't residing in either of the other households, she's safe with you. But your siblings' children are still exposed. We'll need to assess both Bianca and Logan's homes. Likely mandatory classes, regular visits. You may be asked to testify if it escalates." "Escalates?" I asked softly. Her eyes lifted. "Discipline and cruelty often walk hand in hand. Our job is to draw the line." I left the office lighter than when I'd walked in, though my chest burned with a complicated ache. For years, I'd begged my family to see me. For once, someone had looked at the same facts and said, "You're right." The knock came 2 days later, not at my door, at theirs. I wasn't there, but I pictured it vividly. At Bianca's house, the doorbell rings, and she sweeps to the door with her usual imperious flair, only to find 2 social workers standing firm, clipboards in hand. Nolan hovers behind her, sensing something's wrong. Their questions are calm, factual. "Where does your son sleep? How often do you use discipline? Do you understand why public humiliation is considered abusive?" Bianca sputters, waving her college degree like a shield. "I don't need parenting classes. I'm educated." But the clipboard doesn't flinch. Education and parenting are not synonymous. You'll attend, or the state will escalate. Across town, at Logan's house, the scene unfolds differently. His wife, heavily pregnant, eyes swollen from crying, answers the door. Logan looms behind her, bristling with false confidence. The social workers step inside, note the state of the home, note Piper's anxious eyes. They ask about Christmas, about the lesson Ruby was meant to learn. Logan tries to charm them, the way he always does, but charm collapses under paperwork. They inform him, mandatory classes, monitoring, and yes, his record now flagged. I wasn't there to see it, but I didn't need to. The calls came soon enough. Bianca first, her voice breaking glass again. "You vindictive witch! CPS showed up at my house. Do you know what the neighbors think now? Do you have any idea?" I answered once, calmly. Accountability didn't knock. It used a key you handed it. Logan's call followed, his tone ragged with panic. "Do you understand what this means? My wife's pregnant. They're going to monitor us. This is your fault." No, I said evenly. This is yours. I hung up. That night, Ruby climbed into my lap with her blanket and asked, "Why are they so mad at you?" I stroked her hair, because I told the truth. She thought about that for a long time before whispering, "The truth makes people mad." Sometimes, I admitted, but it also makes them change. She frowned. Will they change? I didn't answer. I couldn't. Instead, I tucked her into bed and watched her sleep, her forehead still faintly marked, but her breathing steady. I thought about Bianca's face when she realized strangers now had the right to walk through her home. I thought about Logan's pregnant wife, blindsided by the consequences of his silence. I thought about my mother's cold certainty, my father's mute complicity. They had always believed their cruelty lived safely behind the walls of family. That word was their shield, their excuse, their sanctuary. But now the walls had cracks. Strangers could see inside. And maybe, just maybe, those cracks would let in enough light to reveal them for what they truly were. My phone buzzed again that night, messages stacking one after another. Bianca, you've disgraced us. Do you know what people are saying? Logan, this is a nightmare. We'll never recover. Mom, family is sacred. You don't betray blood. Dad, you should be ashamed of yourself. I scrolled through them, my jaw tightening. Not one asked about Ruby. Not one apologized. Not even a whisper of remorse. I powered the phone down, walked into Ruby's room, and sat beside her bed. She stirred, murmured, then pressed closer to her stuffed rabbit. In the quiet, I whispered to her sleeping form, "If they call this a witch hunt, the law will call it by its name." The words settled into the dark like a vow. For the first time in years, I felt no guilt for drawing a line. Because blood may bind, but it doesn't sanctify. The police station smelled of disinfectant and old paper, a scent that reminded me of waiting rooms and courtrooms all at once. The officer behind the desk looked up when I introduced myself. "Dr. Hart, you're here to file a report?" "Yes," I said, my voice steady. "This isn't a family quarrel. This is assault on a child." I placed the folder on his desk. Photographs, medical records, Ruby's recorded statement. He paged through it, his brow tightening with each image, each note. When he reached the transcript of Ruby whispering, "Grandma wrote, Aunt Bianca hung it, Grandpa and Uncle Logan held me," he set his pen down slowly, like it had grown heavier. "We'll open an investigation," he said, voice low. That was all I needed to hear. I left the station with the cold January air biting my face, a strange mixture of relief and fury twisting in my chest. It was one thing for me to know my family had crossed a line. It was another to see the law agree. The fallout came within a week. First, Bianca's voice shrilled through the phone like sirens. "They fined me, Sloane. Do you hear me? $500. And classes, anger management, parenting classes, as if I'm some criminal who doesn't know how to raise her child." "You wrote on a 7-year-old's face," I replied flatly. "You hung a sign around her neck. The classes are generous." "You're vile," she screeched. "You've ruined my reputation. Everyone at Nolan's school is whispering. The teachers look at me like I'm diseased." "Then you finally know how Ruby felt," I said, and hung up. Hours later, my father's number appeared. His voice was ragged with outrage. $250. Do you realize what you've done? We're branded now. We have a record, Sloane." I didn't raise my voice. "Yes, Dad," and Ruby had "liar" on her forehead. Spot the difference. He cursed before slamming the line dead. The next day, it was Logan, his voice cracked with fury. "They interrogated me like a criminal. Do you know what that means? I have a warning on my record now. Do you get what that does to a man's reputation?" I closed my eyes for a moment, picturing Ruby trembling in my arms on Christmas Eve. "You held my daughter down while they branded her. Yes, Logan, I understand what that does to a man's reputation." His words dissolved into sputtering before the line went silent. And finally, my mother. Her voice shook with a rage that bordered on hysteria. "How dare you drag us through the mud? You disgraced the family. We raised you. We carried you. And this is how you repay us?" I let her rant, the words flowing like venom she had rehearsed her whole life. When she paused for breath, I answered, quiet but sharp. "No, Mom. You raised excuses. You carried cruelty, and now the world sees it for what it is." For the first time in years, she had no reply. The silence stretched before she slammed the phone down. Their punishment wasn't mine to deliver anymore. It was the state's. Their fines. Bianca and Valerie $500 each. Todd and Logan $250. The classes mandatory. The records permanent. No erasing, no burying, under layers of family dinners, and we didn't mean it. It was permanent ink of a different kind. Still, I couldn't shake the images of each of them. My mother, hiding her own scars behind cruelty, convinced that toughness equaled love because softness had been denied to her. My father, always the spectator, always the man who folded his paper while storms raged inches from his chair. Bianca, terrified of losing control over Nolan, so determined to shield him that she sharpened her tongue into a weapon. Logan, drowning in debt and responsibility, clawing at me because I was the only lifeline he knew. They weren't monsters born, they were people warped, and for a moment pity stirred in me. But then I remembered Ruby, her hands shaking as she whispered, "I thought you weren't coming," and pity burned into ash. Because explanations didn't undo harm, and Ruby deserved better than pity as justice. That night, I sat at the kitchen table with Ruby beside me, both of us coloring. She drew stick figures again, 2 people, a small Christmas tree upright this time. "That's us," she said proudly. I nodded. "And the tree doesn't fall?" "No," she said, "because nobody pushed me." I smiled, throat tightening. Later, after she went to bed, I opened the case folder one more time. The ink on the police order was still fresh. Names typed in black and white, fines listed, classes mandated, a record sealed into the system. They had called Ruby the disgrace, but now disgrace belonged to them, etched in court records and supervision logs, the kind of paper trail that no amount of denial could erase. And maybe, I thought, as I closed the folder, that was the most fitting justice of all, their shame written down where strangers could read it, where time couldn't soften it, where they couldn't claim it never happened. Because permanent marker fades, but records don't. It happened on a Thursday afternoon, gray skies pressing low over the city, the kind of weather that made you want to pull your coat tighter. I had gone to pick Ruby up from her art class, a small studio tucked between a laundromat and a cafe that smelled of cinnamon and burnt espresso. Parents clustered outside, talking about homework, carpools, and holiday hangovers. Ruby came bouncing down the steps, paint smudged on her cheek, her hands clutching a folded paper where she'd drawn something bright and clumsy, a tree that stood straight, with 2 figures smiling beneath it. My chest eased at the sight. But then I heard him. Nolan. He was holding court with 3 other boys by the bike rack, his voice smug, carrying further than he knew. It was epic, he bragged. I told her to fix the ornament, held the chair, then pushed her. Boom, tree down. And everyone believed me. They always do. I'm good at it. I could even teach you. The words landed like a stone in my stomach. Ruby froze mid-step, her face paling. I felt the world tilt. I wanted to storm across the lot, grab him by the shoulders, shout, "You think this is a game? You think breaking my daughter is a trophy?" But my hands didn't move, my voice didn't rise. I stood still, heart pounding, because in that moment I realized something. Nolan had confessed, and he had confessed in public. Another parent was standing nearby, a man in a navy coat, his brow furrowed as he glanced toward the boys. He'd heard it too. Our eyes met briefly, a flicker of recognition passing between us. Witness. Ruby's hand slipped into mine, trembling. She whispered, "Mom, did you hear him?" I knelt so we were eye level, my voice calm, though my insides blazed. "Yes, sweetheart, I heard." Her eyes searched mine, desperate. "So now you know I didn't lie?" I cupped her face gently. "Ruby, I always knew. I didn't need him to prove it. But now—" I glanced at Nolan still laughing, his friends hanging on every word. "Now the world knows too." We walked past them without a word. Nolan's laughter followed us, cocky and careless. Ruby's grip on my hand tightened until her knuckles whitened. I squeezed back, steady, unyielding. Inside the car, she finally let the tears come. He told everyone, and they laughed. Why do they always believe him? I turned in my seat, brushing her hair back from her damp cheeks. Because some people confuse confidence with truth, but truth, Ruby, has a shape. It doesn't change, no matter who tells it, no matter how many times it's repeated. She sniffled. "What shape is it?" I thought for a moment. "It's the shape of your story staying the same every time you tell it. And that's what you've done. You've never changed a word. That's why I believe you. That's why I always will." Her lips trembled into a small, watery smile. "So, does this mean he's in trouble?" My chest ached at the hope in her voice. "Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but truth has long legs. It always catches up." When we got home, Ruby retreated to her room, curling up with her stuffed rabbit. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the manila folder again. I thought about adding Nolan's boast, writing a new note, self-confession, overheard by peers, and parent witness. It wasn't legally necessary. I had enough. But part of me wanted it recorded anyway. Not for the court, not for CPS, but for Ruby. Proof in writing that she was never the liar they branded her. I didn't march back to confront him, didn't call Bianca to unleash fury. I didn't need to. His own mouth had written the indictment. He had bragged his guilt into existence. Later that evening, Ruby climbed into my lap while I reviewed patient charts. "Mom," she asked softly, "what happens when people lie and everyone believes them?" I kissed the top of her head. Eventually, they start believing their own lies. And that's when they trip, because lies can't hold weight forever. They crumble. She leaned against me, her breathing evening out. "So, I don't have to be scared anymore?" I tightened my arms around her. "No, sweetheart, you don't. Because the truth is on your side, and I'm on your side, always." She drifted into sleep, her face soft for the first time in days. I sat there, holding her, staring into the quiet. Nolan's boast still echoed in my ears. But instead of rage, I felt something unexpected, relief. Because I didn't need to prove Ruby's innocence anymore. He had done it for me. And though he thought his laughter was power, it was really just evidence waiting to be heard. Tomorrow would bring more calls, more outrage, more pleas, disguised as apologies. Tomorrow they'd say the words sorry the way people say invoice. But tonight, the truth was enough. For Ruby, for me. And for the record that would never fade, the calls didn't stop. If anything, they multiplied. Ring after ring, message after message, each one dripping with desperation that sounded suspiciously like entitlement. Bianca was the first to pivot, her voice suddenly syrupy where it had once been venom. "Sloane, listen, I know things got tense, but Nolan's been so heartbroken about camp. You know how much he's been looking forward to it. He's already packed his bag, practicing his speeches for the talent show. If you could just pay this one time, it would mean the world to him." Her voice cracked perfectly on world, as if rehearsed. I waited until she fell quiet. "No, Bianca, I won't." "But you don't understand," she pressed. "If he misses this, the other kids will get ahead of him. He'll fall behind. This is about his future." I almost laughed. His future. The boy who had pushed my daughter off a chair and bragged about it like it was a sport. "Then you should invest in his future yourself. You're his mother." The line went cold. Logan called next, his voice rougher, his words scattered. "Look, Sloane, I know you're angry, but Piper, she doesn't understand why the trip got canceled. She's been crying for days. And my wife's due soon, and we're already drowning in bills. Could you just this once, help us out again?" "Logan," I said, leaning against the counter, "your wife's pregnancy is not my responsibility. Your bills are not my responsibility. And your daughter's disappointment is a mirror of what Ruby felt when you held her down while they branded her." "That's not fair," he snapped. "I didn't write anything. I was just trying to—" "To what?" I interrupted. "Keep the peace? You chose silence. That's not neutral, Logan. That's siding with harm." He sputtered, but I hung up before he found more words. And then came Valerie, my mother. Her voice trembled with a kind of manufactured frailty, the kind she used when she wanted to remind me she was aging, delicate, in need. "Sloane, please. The mortgage is behind. Your father's blood pressure is through the roof. Do you want us to lose the house after everything we've done for you?" I closed my eyes, picturing her on Christmas Eve, standing tall and cold as she justified scrawling liar on Ruby's forehead. "Everything you've done for me?" I asked softly. "Tell me, Mom. Was it when you ignored my birthdays? When you piled chores on me because Bianca was studying and Logan was a boy? Or when you raised me to believe cruelty was discipline?" She inhaled sharply, but I didn't let her reply. "I won't pay for your house. I won't pay for Nolan's camp. I won't pay for Logan's car. My responsibility is Ruby. That's where it ends." Her voice sharpened, mask slipping. "You've abandoned us. You've betrayed your blood." "No," I said firmly. "I've finally stopped betraying myself." The line clicked dead. For days, their voices filled the air around me, buzzing like flies, sometimes shouting, sometimes begging, sometimes crying. And yet, through it all, not once did any of them say the one thing that mattered. "We're sorry for what we did to Ruby." Not once. That absence became louder than all their words combined. At night, I sat at the kitchen table with a pen and notebook, drafting a letter I would never send. If you ever want forgiveness, you will need to do 3 things. Write an apology addressed to Ruby, admitting exactly what you did. Complete your classes and prove you understand why this was abuse, not discipline. Accept that for now, you have no access to Ruby. No holidays, no visits, no unsupervised contact. Period. I read the letter aloud once, hearing how steady my voice sounded, then folded it neatly and slid it into a drawer. It wasn't for them, it was for me. Proof that my boundaries had shape, that they weren't shifting sand anymore. Meanwhile, Ruby began her own healing. I found a child therapist who specialized in trauma, and we went together to the first session. Ruby sat on the floor with markers, drawing while the therapist gently asked questions. She talked about the tree falling, about Nolan's push, about the sign. Her voice was small, but it didn't shake this time. Afterward, Ruby asked if we could buy sticky notes. That night, I found them plastered across her mirror in shaky handwriting. I tell the truth. I'm brave. Mom believes me. Each note was a shield. We started building new rituals, too. Sunday mornings became pancake day, just us two in pajamas, music playing, while we flipped batter and laughed at our failures. We made plans for next Christmas, not at my parents' house, not at any family house, but here. Just us. Ruby wanted to decorate a tiny tree in her room, one she could touch without fear of punishment. I promised her we would. Still, there were moments when guilt crept in, whispering in my ear. You've cut them off completely. Maybe you went too far. Maybe families are supposed to bend, not break. But then I'd remember Ruby's whisper in the corner, Mommy, I'm so hungry. And I knew, boundaries had costs, yes, but the cost of not drawing them was higher. One evening, after Ruby had gone to bed, I sat on the porch with a cup of tea, listening to the city hum. My phone buzzed on the table beside me. Another message from my father. We can't survive without you. I didn't answer, because the truth was they could survive. What they couldn't survive was being held accountable. And for the first time in my life, I realized the same was true for me. I couldn't survive another year of being their scapegoat, their checkbook, their silent witness. Boundaries had costs, but freedom had value. I chose freedom. The knock at my door came on a Sunday afternoon. Soft at first, hesitant. Not the pounding of outrage I'd grown used to through phone calls and voicemails, but something thinner, weaker. When I opened it, my father stood on the porch alone. No mother at his side, no Bianca hiding behind Venom, no Logan clenching his jaw like he always did when he wanted to look strong. Just Todd Hart, hands shoved in his coat pockets, looking older than I remembered. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The winter air slipped past him into the house, cold against my skin. Can I come in? He asked finally. I didn't step aside. Why? He swallowed, shifting on his feet. I wanted to talk. Just me. I hesitated, then opened the door wider. He stepped in, his boots heavy on the hardwood, eyes scanning the small living room like he was entering a stranger's house. Ruby was in her room coloring. I closed her door gently, then faced him. Say what you came to say. He cleared his throat, voice rough. I made mistakes. Things got out of hand. Your mother... Don't! I cut in sharply. Don't hand this off to Mom. You were there. You held Ruby while they wrote on her face. His shoulders slumped. For once he didn't argue. I'm sorry, he murmured. The word hung in the air like smoke. It was the closest thing to remorse I had heard from any of them. But then he added, it's just, with CPS, the police, the neighbors talking, it's hard. We're struggling, Sloane. And the money, the transfers, without them we're drowning. Could you? And there it was, the real reason. I almost laughed. Of course. Even now, when shame finally cracked through his shell, the apology came stapled to an invoice. No, I said, my voice like ice. His head jerked up. Sloane, be reasonable. The mortgage... No, I repeated. Not 1 cent. Not one transfer. Not until you've done the classes, written an apology to Ruby, and accepted that for now, you don't see her. No holidays. No visits. No unsupervised contact. His mouth opened, then closed. He looked like a man caught between habit and honesty. That's extreme. I stepped closer, lowering my voice. What's extreme is writing on a 7-year-old's forehead. What's extreme is calling humiliation discipline. What's extreme is choosing silence when your granddaughter begged for help. He flinched. For the first time in my life, I saw something crack in him. Shame, regret, maybe even love, twisted and late. "I'll think about it," he whispered. "Do more than think," I said. When he left, the door shut softly behind him. I leaned against it, my heart pounding. Not with rage this time, but with something quieter. Sadness, maybe. Or recognition that even the man who had always been the spectator could feel the sting of consequence. Ruby patted out in her socks, rubbing her eyes. "Who was it?" "Grandpa," I said gently. Her face tensed. "Did he say sorry?" "A little." She frowned, considering. "Did you believe him?" I crouched, meeting her gaze. I believe he wants things to be easier again. But wanting easy and wanting to do better aren't the same. She nodded slowly, wise beyond her years, then tugged my hand. "Come bake cookies with me?" We did. Flour dusted the counters, chocolate chips rolled under the fridge. Ruby's laughter filled the kitchen. We sang carols badly, competing to see who could go more off-key. She won, though I pretended otherwise. Later, we set a small tree in the corner of the living room. Nothing grand, just sturdy, with ornaments Ruby picked herself. She hung one lopsided star at the top, giggling when it tilted. "It's perfect," she declared. And it was. That night, after she drifted to sleep, I sat by her bed, watching her chest rise and fall. The faint shadow of the marker was gone now, her forehead clear. The house was quiet, but my conscience was loud, steady, certain. I had broken the cycle. I had chosen Ruby. I had chosen us. Maybe one day my family would finish their classes, write their apologies, mean their words. Maybe one day the door would open again, not for money, but for change. Until then, the door would stay locked. I kissed Ruby's temple and whispered, "Ordinary is enough." And for the first time in years, I believed it.